I'd like to turn to the questions now. We've got a lot of them. So I'm going to put this up on screen here. Once we establish that there are, in fact, craft flying in our skies using this tool, then what?
Yeah, well, why are you asking me? It's just going to be a lot of fun. That's all I can say. We need the data. I'm a believer in truth, and I can't handle not having the truth. That's not comfortable to me. And I think there's a lot of people that share that. So I just want the truth. And this will give us the truth. And there's nothing worse than uncertainty and doubt, which is what I think they're sowing, to keep us all confused and keep us not organized. So this will organize us because there'll be no doubt about certain things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're part of this puzzle is a certain, or part of the process is a certain a level. I mean, others have to take it from there, right? I mean, once there is undeniable data, what do we do about it as a society? Well, Mitch Randall and Ascendant AI can only go so far.
I will just throw this in. It's relevant. When I was at the Galileo Project, there was a group called the Societal Impacts Group. And the question was, what do they do if the Galileo Project finds some evidence of, we prove that there's something in the sky? And the conclusion, to my surprise, was we tell the government and let them figure out what to do with it.
Interesting.
So that's a different approach than I have. My approach is the data goes on the screen real time. And it's available real time. So if you see the data you like, you can download it.
There you go, folks. You get first dibs on the wow signal. It's not going into the federal pipe before you get to see it.
Oh, that was another thing too, that the Galileo Project, I'm not putting them down. I'm saying this was a decision that a group of scientists made based on their sensibilities. They said, what happens if we get good data? Do we share it, or do we first process it and write a paper about it and then share it? And the answer was, we process it, keep it to ourselves, and draw the conclusions, and then we put it out. That's different than me. My plan is to put the data out. It's just there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we appreciate that, the spirit of, inclusivity and public access, public first. So thank you, Mitch. This is a question here. Are there off-the-shelf solutions like motion tracking mirrors that amateur astronomers can use with their existing telescopes in order to reliably track and film these objects in flight?
One really cool thing about this network is it can generate a feed of positions, real-time track positions. So you could be on the receiving end of that feed that tells your telescope exactly where to point. So that's, this is all part of the development plan. And that particular feed might be, like a subscription or something, because we also want to keep our servers running, and there's cost to that. So we have to figure out some kind of business model to this thing that keeps it alive, like ad revenue or something that's coming in. And we haven't figured this out, but there's certain users that are going to want to see if there's an actual object track happening in real time near their telescope. They want their telescope to track it. So we will provide that feed.
Interesting.
So that's...
Yeah, I can see, once this gets off the ground, the potential collaborations with other communities, the amateur astronomer community. Yep. There are Skywatch, same name as your project, Skywatch parties around the country where people get together and point their telescopes at things. So kind of have to cross these bridges and see what comes next. But once the data's there, it's go time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Next question here. I think this might be on the minds of a few people. I would like to know specifically, what is the technical nature of involved to install these citizen detection systems on our own land, the hardware, the software, where to get them? And also, does the object go inside the house, on the roof? Where? Yeah. So
it's a two-piece system. For one thing, remember, it's receive only. So there's no way an object can say, can detect that you're watching them, or, so you are in stealth mode. You're just receiving signals that are coming to you. But it's a two-piece system. There'll be a box. that's modem size kind of a box, very simple to plug in to the internet and plug power into. And we're thinking there'd be we haven't worked this out yet, but a port where you can hook a monitor up so you can see a bunch of stuff happening at your particular site, not just at the web page that shows when it's all combined together. But then, so that's one of the pieces. And the second piece is there is an antenna that goes on the roof and a cable that goes to it. So the consumer, just like a TV in the past, usually would have a TV and then you have to put an antenna on the roof. It's the same model as that.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. I love that it's receive only, and I think a lot of people will appreciate that stealth mode.
Yeah,
makes this very accessible.
Yep. And there's because of it, there's no FCC license or any kind of issues like that would, you would think you can't run a radar here. Yeah, you can run an FM receiver here. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here's a slightly more technical question. AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, stood up by Congress, has documented UAP radar and thermal signatures. Some of the highest quality UAP videos are using shortwave infrared sensors. What advantages can radar offer as compared to a potential network of citizen infrared camera systems?
Yeah, in the video, I tried to point that out. Is the point, and let me just back up a minute. Instrument design is an art in itself. And, you can make a high quality instrument that, does really high precision measurements, et cetera, et cetera. But if it never sees a UFO, who cares? So right. The part of this instrument design is that the statistics, the chances that you are going to just walk outside and see a UFO are pretty small. And the same with a radar. The chance that one receiver sees a UFO is relatively small. So the idea is to have a network across the whole country. So now the statistics have gone way up. Basically, if there's anything over the continental United States, one of the radars or 5 of them will see that, and they'll be able to combine their data and show a track. So wait, I got myself. I kind of lost the question. Remind me of the question.
Well, that's okay. I guess the question is about infrared camera as compared to radar.
So the thing about infrared cameras, they see about 1/10 the distance as a radar. So that means they see about 1/1000th the volume of the radar, which means you have to have about 1,000 times more of them in order to get the same kind of coverage. So infrared's great. Here's another thing about it. Let me say, the chance of seeing something is proportional to the volume that you can see. So that's a thing that Jacques Vallée figured out in a book quite a while ago. If you can see further, you see proportionally, the cube of that distance, you're more likely to see an object. But the chances that you see something close enough in your, let's say that your infrared instrument can see out 10 kilometers, which is pretty far actually for that. The chances that it's actually within 1 kilometer is like 1%. Most of the stuff will be outside of 1 kilometer, and most likely you'll have 3 pixels on it. So the whole point, a lot of people think I'm going to have a camera system, so because I want to see what it looks like, but you might just have 3 pixels. So if you really go through the design of the system, you realize cameras are not that great. You need a whole bunch of them in order to triangulate, and most of the time you just see a couple pixels.
Mm-hmm. Now, one notable thing on passive radar, to my understanding, totally correct me if I'm wrong, but it will not be able to actually describe the shape of a craft, the size of a craft. Is that right? It'll be detected as an object of unknown size and shape. Is that true?
That is correct. So you get a detection. You get basically a dot.
Right.
There is an amplitude to that dot, and you can make some assumptions or some. For example, it's constantly seeing airplanes. So we're going to take that data because we know what the airplanes were. So we can finally, at some point, we can say, "Oh, I see this. Minus 30 dBm is a 747, and minus 38 dBm is a Cessna 172." I mean, we might be able to make some of those kind of correlations with AI or some other algorithm that does those kind of correlations. But you're right. You're not imaging the craft. You just have a signal strength key off that you can try to work with.
I'm curious, is there any sort of like sonic technology that could be deployed as well, not to actually detect the UAP, but to say, oh, so this craft was here, it was not on the FAA, it was not known to be an aircraft, but we have a sound profile on it that resolves that it was a drone, that it was a bird, that it was a flapping balloon or something like that.
Yeah, again, you have this issue of the radius. So you could, let's say you added a microphone to each one of these systems. That's of limited use, like already 1% roughly of the stuff you can see with the system, you will be able to hear. So we're being very deliberate in our design. We said we're going to look for instantaneous acceleration with radar. And we're just trying to really focus on that because we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. And we want to deliver on time. Actually, I want to deliver ahead of time and, under cost. So we're really focused on that.
Yeah. Sometimes you see these like massive arrays of multiple cameras and infrared cameras and all sorts of sensors. And it's amazing, right? And the whole kit costs God knows how much, tens of thousands of dollars, and there's one of them. And is it where it needs to be, right? And once the object leaves its radius, what then?
Yeah, at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, we have, radars set up around the country. And what are the chances that a tornado came by one of those? These are the highest precision, best Doppler weather radars in the world. What are the chances that a tornado came across? To my knowledge, a tornado never approached one of those radars. So what we did was we built a radar truck. Again, this is instrument design. We built a radar truck to go out and find tornadoes. Now, it wasn't the most precise, best instrument ever made, but it got next to a tornado. So that's all part of the instrument design. We're not trying to make the most perfect radar. We're really trying to get the coverage to make sure we get these sightings that are, of the quality that we can draw some conclusions with.
Yeah. Right place, right time. I know Richard Dolan has postulated that there might be 50,000 credible, good UFO sightings globally per year, but he puts a factor of 10 on that minimum to say how many are seen but not reported, and then how many could have been seen, but you weren't smoking a cigarette looking up at 2 a.m. that night. So.
Well, here's another thing. What if every night there's 1,000 in the sky, but they don't have lights? You would never know.
Right. And they're going 20 or 40,000 miles an hour, faster than the human eye can perceive.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's lost data, right? It's like, our data is floating out into space right now, presumably could be picked up by any astute observer. And they're in our space and we're not collecting the data on them, right? And in my view, in the problem of decoding intent and the urgency to do so, primarily with an intelligence-oriented, response-oriented framework, you need the right kind of data to resolve the unknowns into fewer potential hypotheses or fewer potential conclusions. So this is really important. Let's go back to a few other questions here, and then we'll move on to some other topics. This is a question. Let's see here. This one. Is it possible that some UAP could evade this passive radar detection?
100% possible. So, we don't claim that it's going to see everything, but we certainly know of historical UFO cases where there was radar data. So we know that they do show up on radar. So, for example, the Tic Tac incident. Yeah. So that they had been seeing that on radar for weeks in advance of the event. That Commander Fravor reports. So we know that some of them show up. We don't have to detect every single thing and write a paper about every single thing to prove that we're being visited. We just need one.
Right. I mean, interestingly, there's radar confirmation in the way back decades ago, and there's even radar confirmation in modern times. So presumably the UAP are either not finding ways to evade it or they don't want to evade it, but that radar is able to detect these over decades and even into the present suggests that it's a viable detection method.
And not only that, I'm of the opinion that, every now and then it's another species just passing by. I think that I have no way to prove it, and that's what I'm working on. But, I have a feeling that the universe is just teeming with life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we'll get into that in a minute here and talk about our postulations about that. A couple more questions, and I'm going to rattle off a few as we go through this, but Aero has identified so-called UAP hotspots. I'll have this up on screen. Would Skywatch be installed in phases with priority locations corresponding to these hotspots?
Yes and no, because before it's released to the public, I'm going to be working with a couple different scientific groups that I've been talking with that have, they want to be part of the beta. So this would be, these would be the people that are writing the papers on the instrument and getting really familiar with how it works. And they may install the system, where they expect to see, hotspot. But in the general scope of it, when it goes on sale, we just want every consumer that's at every hotspot and everywhere in between to buy one. So the idea is, we're going to cover the whole nation. That includes all the hotspots. So we're not going to, there's no reason for us to prioritize a hotspot because, it's up to the citizens who live there to buy it.
Right. And how interesting would it be to know when it leaves a hotspot, where does it then go? Does it enter the ocean in a completely random location or on an opposite coastline?
Right.
Since we have the master of the technology here, I'm going to skip ahead to the more technical questions. Would Skywatch detect the 1 to 3 gigahertz and 8 to 12 gigahertz emissions that Chris Nolan referenced from the Aero Kirkpatrick briefing?
No, we're not emissions. So this is using FM radio transmitters as the transmitters of opportunity. And because, for one thing, they're very high power, they're pointed at the horizon mostly, and they cover the entire nation. So they're perfect for looking at, objects where we expect to see UFOs. So we're not actually just randomly receiving all frequencies. We're receiving specifically the radio transmissions from the FM transmitter towers.
Okay. Does it detect only metallic objects or any objects? And I might add, if it's some sort of non-material object, if it's in some sort of space-time bubble, we can only speculate, but, would it be able to detect non-hard physical objects?
Yeah, I mean, this to me is the exciting thing about making a new instrument is you don't know what you're going to get. So, there could be a metal object out there that we don't see on the radar. Where it's like, why is it not on the radar? It's right there. Or there could be some blob distortion in the atmosphere that we see perfectly. We don't have any idea what's going to happen. The main point is, I hope radar's pretty good at things that are metal because, they reflect. And it's actually, it works on stuff that's not metal too, because, any disturbance in the dielectric constant or the magnetic constant will reflect electromagnetic waves. So, plasma, we could see potentially, we could see metal, we could see other stuff. So we'll just have to wait and see what we get.
Great. Yeah. Last tech question. What is the max altitude it can detect? Can it detect objects coming from space or going out to space?
Yeah. I mean, so when I spec the radar, it's really hard to actually come up with any numbers because every situation is a little different. It depends on what the radio transmitter is. A lot of them have different gain antennas, but most of the FM radio transmitters have antennas that are focusing the energy in a circle at the horizon. So they generally don't transmit upwards. They're trying not to transmit upwards to conserve their power and put it where the customers are going to be for the FM radio. So, I've been saying 80,000 feet. And that's some kind of estimate that I'm saying based on what I think the illumination would be at the 80,000 feet out some distance,
Yeah.
So anyway, that's about the best number I can give right now.
In the Nimitz case, I believe the objects were reported to be coming. In the Nimitz case, I believe the objects were reported to be coming from around that elevation down to the surface of the ocean in a matter of seconds. So, well, Mitch, this is great. I'm sure there's so much support for this. One person basically, let's see, it's not a question. It's $500 is a great deal. Where can I sign up? And I'm sure you get that quite a lot.
I'm inundated with that, by the way. People love it so much they don't even want to hear that it's not ready yet. They just want to buy it.
Right.
So
right.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah. So if you're one of those folks, support Mitch. Stay tuned, and call for this at the level of its premise and its inherent logic, which to me is self-evident. And in a state of non-disclosure by both government and NHI, we have to pursue options like this. And to press the hands of those who are the information holders. So, a big inspiration of mine and of Emergent is putting tools in the hands of people to decode this phenomenon and come to logical assessments that basically iterate forward over time as new evidence comes in, and that can inform the collection of evidence. And I think this is just a perfect example of how citizens can be involved in that and can collect the evidence themselves and share it. And be a part of this event, this is an entity encounter, and we are the human species. So, Mitch, great to talk through this. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my conversation with Mitch Randall, where we talk about citizen detection and tracking of UAP. We're now going to go into part 2 of this episode of Emergent and talk about the other side of citizen disclosure, the decoding of the intent and agendas that might be at play at the level of non-human intelligence. So please head over to part 2, where Mitch and I continue to discuss possible scenarios at play and the potential NHI agenda and intent that we might be observing in this phenomenon.